In January 2025, a graduate student dropped her water bottle in a restricted cave deep in the Grand Canyon. When she climbed down to get it, she found footprints, human footprints, preserved in hardened mud for 17,000 years. That discovery just forced archaeologists to rewrite the entire timeline of human migration into North America. And it gets weirder from there. Let's get one thing straight right away. This isn't another clickbait story about aliens or ancient civilizations with laser technology. This is real archaeology, peer-reviewed, published in Nature in February of this year. The traditional story, the one taught in every textbook, goes like this. Humans crossed from Siberia into Alaska around 13,000 years ago via a land bridge called Beringia. They walked through an ice-free corridor between two massive glaciers, spread south through North America, and eventually populated the entire hemisphere. Clean, simple, everybody agreed on it for decades. Except that story has been falling apart piece by piece for the last 10 years. And this new discovery, it's not just another piece, it's the entire puzzle box getting kicked off the table. The Grand Canyon site, which archaeologists are calling GC-17 because apparently creativity dies when you get a PhD. The National Park Service doesn't advertise that these restricted zones exist, but they're all over the canyon. Some are there to protect endangered species. Some are there because they're genuinely dangerous. And some, like GC-17, are there because they contain archaeological sites so fragile that a single careless visitor could destroy thousands of years of history. The graduate student, her name is Sarah Chen, and she's from UC Berkeley, was part of a routine survey team. They were documenting cave formations, taking mineral samples, standard stuff. The cave system they were in had been explored before, mapped in the 1980s, but nobody had done serious archaeological work there because, honestly, nobody expected to find anything interesting. Here's why. The cave is small, barely 40 feet deep. It's a squeeze to get into. The entrance is partially collapsed. It doesn't look like the kind of place ancient humans would hang out. There's no water source nearby, no obvious strategic advantage, no reason to be there. So for decades, it was basically ignored while archaeologists focused on more promising sites. Sarah dropped her water bottle. It rolled down a slope into a lower chamber that wasn't on the original maps. She climbed down after it, and that's when she saw them. Footprints. Dozens of them, preserved in what used to be mud, and is now essentially stone. She took photos, climbed back up, and showed her supervisor. Dr. Michael Torres, the lead archaeologist on the project, thought she was joking at first. Then he saw the photos. Within 48 hours they had sealed off the cave and called in specialists from 3 different universities. What makes these footprints so extraordinary isn't just their age, though that's mind-blowing enough. It's what they tell us about who made them and what they were doing. The footprints belong to at least 7 different individuals. They used multiple dating techniques to figure out the age. Radiocarbon dating of organic material trapped in the mud, which measures when minerals were last exposed to light. Uranium series dating of the calcite that formed over the footprints. All 3 methods came back with the same answer, give or take a few hundred years. 17,000 years old. That's 4,000 years before humans were supposed to be in North America, according to the old model. 4,000 years. That's not a rounding error. That's not a margin of error in dating techniques. That's a complete rewrite of human history in the Americas. But wait, it gets better. The footprints aren't just random. They show deliberate movement patterns. Some are small, probably children. Some are average adult size. One set is large, probably a tall male. They're walking in the same direction, moving deeper into the cave. And here's the kicker. They're not in a hurry. The stride lengths are normal. The foot placement is careful. These people were exploring, not fleeing. The research team found something else in that cave. Deliberate cuts in the rock face. Somebody was mining minerals. They've identified traces of hematite, which is iron oxide, and it was being extracted from specific veins in the rock. Hematite has one primary use for prehistoric people. They were mining paint. Now, why would people 17,000 years ago go into a difficult-to-access cave to mine pigment? Because pigment meant something to them. Art, ritual, body decoration. We don't know exactly what, but it tells us these weren't just people surviving. The traditional migration story has another problem, and this discovery makes it worse. If humans were in the Grand Canyon 17,000 years ago, they couldn't have come through the ice-free corridor. That corridor didn't exist yet. The glaciers were still connected. There was no land route from Alaska to the interior of North America. So how did they get there? The leading theory, and it's been gaining traction for years, is the coastal route. People came from Siberia, sure, but they didn't walk inland, probably, but watercraft capable of coastal travel, living off marine resources, and gradually spread inland. Coastlines from 17,000 years ago are now underwater because sea levels have risen dramatically since the last ice age. Any archaeological sites from that coastal migration are currently sitting under 300 feet of ocean. They're effectively impossible to find and excavate. But the Grand Canyon site supports the coastal theory indirectly. If people were in Arizona 17,000 years ago, they had to get there somehow. And if they couldn't come through the ice, they must have come around it. The dates work. The geography works. It fits. There's another site that this discovery connects to, and it's one that's been controversial for decades. White Sands National Park in New Mexico. In 2021, researchers published evidence of human footprints there dated to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. The archaeology community went ballistic. Half the experts said the dating was wrong. The other half said this changed everything. The debate has been raging ever since. The Grand Canyon discovery doesn't prove White Sands is correct, but it sure makes it more plausible. If humans were in Arizona 17,000 years ago, having them in New Mexico 21,000 years ago becomes a lot less crazy. The dots are starting to connect, and the picture they're forming looks nothing like what we thought. Let's talk about what this means for the Clovis first theory, because that's basically dead now. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists believed the Clovis culture, named after distinctive spear points found near Clovis, New Mexico, represented the first humans in the Americas. Clovis sites date to around 13,000 years ago. The theory was clean, the evidence was widespread, and for decades it was settled science. Except it wasn't. Starting in the 1990s, sites started appearing that predated Clovis. Monte Verde in Chile, dated to 14,500 years ago. The Gault site in Texas, 16,000 years. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, potentially 19,000 years. Each one was controversial. Each one was fought over. But the evidence kept accumulating. The Grand Canyon discovery is the nail in the coffin. Clovis first is done. Humans were in the Americas thousands of years before Clovis culture emerged. Clovis wasn't the first. It was just one of many cultures that developed after people had already been here for millennia. Now here's where it gets really interesting. If humans were in North America 17,000 years ago or earlier, what happened during those first few thousand years? Why don't we have more evidence? Where are the sites? Part of the answer is that we probably have found them and didn't recognize them. Archaeology has been biased toward finding Clovis sites because that's what we expected to find. If you're looking for distinctive spear points and sophisticated stone tools, you might miss cruder. Earlier technology, confirmation bias in science is real, and archaeology isn't immune. Another part of the answer is that early populations were probably small and widely dispersed. We're not talking about thousands of people. We're talking about maybe a few hundred individuals spread across an entire continent. The chances of finding their sites are tiny. The fact that we're finding them at all is remarkable, and some of the evidence is just gone. Erosion, geological activity, all of these destroy archaeological sites. The Grand Canyon footprints survived because they were in a cave, protected from the elements. Most open-air sites from that time period are gone, washed away, buried under sediment, or destroyed by natural processes. The research team at GC17 is being incredibly careful about how they excavate and study the site. They're using techniques that didn't exist even 10 years ago. 3D laser scanning to create perfect, digital models of the footprints. DNA analysis of sediment samples to see if they can recover genetic material. Microscopic analysis of the tool marks to understand what kind of tools were used. They're also not rushing. The site has been there for 17,000 years. It can wait a few more years to be properly studied. Modern archaeology has learned hard lessons from sites that were excavated too quickly with inadequate methods. Information was lost forever. They're not making that mistake here. One of the most fascinating aspects of the discovery is what it tells us about Ice Age climate in the Southwest. 17,000 years ago, the Grand Canyon area was completely different from today. It was cooler, wetter, with more vegetation. The landscape was probably grassland or open woodland, not the desert we see today. The cave where the footprints were found would have been easier to access 17,000 years ago. The entrance wasn't as collapsed. The terrain around it was different. It makes sense that people would explore it. From their perspective, it was probably just an interesting cave in an area they were already inhabiting. Climate data supports this. Ice cores from Greenland, sediment cores from lakes, pollen analysis from pack rat middens. All of it paints a picture of the Southwest during the last glacial maximum. Even thrive. What were these people eating? The research team found evidence that helps answer that. They recovered tiny fragments of charcoal from ancient fires. Analysis of that charcoal shows they were burning juniper and pine, trees that still grow in the area, but at higher elevations now. They've also found microscopic plant remains that suggest they were processing seeds and possibly roots. No direct evidence of meat consumption yet, but that's not surprising. Boons don't survive well in these conditions. But these people were almost certainly hunting. Everyone from that time period hunted. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, ancient bison, camels, horses. All of these existed in North America 17,000 years ago. They were all potential food sources. Here's something that blows my mind. The people who made those footprints had no idea they were doing anything historically significant. They were just living their lives. Going into a cave to get some pigment. Maybe the kids came along because why not? Maybe it was a nice day. But their casual decision to walk into that cave and extract some minerals preserved a moment in time that's now revolutionizing our understanding of human history. That's the beauty and frustration of archaeology. The most important discoveries are often complete accidents. The scientific community's response to this discovery has been mixed, which is typical. Some researchers immediately accepted it. The dating is solid, the evidence is clear. It fits with other recent discoveries. Others are more cautious. They want to see more evidence. They want independent verification. They're not saying it's wrong. They're just saying let's be careful before we rewrite all the textbooks. And that's fair. Science should be cautious. But the evidence is piling up fast. White Sands, the Grand Canyon, Monte Verde, the Gault site, and probably a dozen other sites that will be published in the next few years. The pattern is clear. Humans were in the Americas earlier than we thought, probably much earlier. There's also the question of who these people were genetically. Modern Native Americans are descended from the people who crossed into the Americas during the Ice Age. But the genetic picture is complicated. There were multiple waves of migration. The research team is trying to extract DNA from the sediments at GC17, but it's a long shot. DNA degrades quickly in warm, dry environments. The Grand Canyon isn't the worst place for preservation, but it's not great either. If they can recover even fragments of ancient DNA, it could tell us about the genetic diversity of these early populations. What's next for this research? The team is expanding their search. If there's one cave with preserved footprints, there are probably others. They're using satellite imagery and LiDAR, which is basically laser radar, to identify potential cave systems in restricted areas of the Grand Canyon. They're also working with the National Park Service to survey sites that were documented decades ago but never properly investigated. There's also a push to explore the Pacific coast more aggressively. If the coastal migration theory is correct, and it's looking more correct every day, then we need to be looking underwater. Marine archaeologists are developing techniques to survey and excavate submerged sites. It's expensive. It's technically challenging, but it's necessary. The Grand Canyon discovery is also changing how we think about early human capabilities. These weren't primitive cavemen barely surviving. They were sophisticated people with complex behaviors. They made art. They explored their environment. They had social structures complex enough to organize group activities like mining expeditions. The tools they used weren't the refined stone points we associate with later cultures, but they were effective. Simple doesn't mean ineffective. These people survived and thrived in challenging environments with technology that modern people would struggle to replicate. There's a lesson in all of this about scientific humility. We thought we had the story of human migration figured out. We were wrong. Not slightly wrong. fundamentally wrong. The dates were off by thousands of years. The routes were different. The complexity was greater, and we only discovered this because a graduate student dropped her water bottle in the right place. How many other discoveries are waiting? How many sites have we walked past without looking closely enough? Rock shelters and coastal areas hold evidence that could further rewrite our understanding of human history. The Grand Canyon footprints are 17,000 years old, but the story they tell is just beginning. As more sites are discovered, as dating techniques improve, as our understanding deepens, we're going to learn things that would seem impossible today. The first humans in the Americas might have arrived 25,000 years ago, maybe 30,000. We don't know yet. What we do know is that the simple story we told for decades is done. The real story is messier, more complicated, and far more interesting. Humans didn't just walk across a land bridge and spread south. They navigated coastlines in boats. They adapted to diverse environments. They developed complex cultures thousands of years earlier than we thought possible. And somewhere in the Grand Canyon, preserved in stone, are the footprints of children who walked alongside adults on an errand we can barely understand. Never knowing that 17,000 years later people would be studying their steps and marveling at what they represent. If this kind of archaeological deep dive interests you, hit subscribe. There's more coming soon, including follow-ups on this story as more research gets published.